I'm Maya. I'm 26 years old, and I work as an admin manager. For the last 8 years, my life has been a single, focused goal: save enough for a down payment on a house. I worked, I scraped, I said no to vacations, and I finally did it. $42,000, all of it earned by me, for me. Then, the ambush. My parents sit me down in the living room. The air is thick and sour. My 30-year-old brother, Leo, just stares at the carpet, refusing to look at me. Then my mother says it. They don't ask. They demand that I give them my entire $42,000 savings. My blood runs cold. It's for Leo. Of course it is. He's racked up $75,000 in gambling debts. My dad leans in, his voice shaking. This will destroy the family, Maya. Your brother could be killed. Loan sharks. He's talking about loan sharks. I look at Leo, the golden child, who still can't meet my eyes. Then I look at my parents, and I say, no. I saved this for my future, I tell them, my voice barely steady. He ruined his, but I see the look in their eyes. The shock. The anger. They didn't just ask. They expected it. How do you survive when the people who are supposed to protect you see you as nothing but a piggy bank? If you've ever been the one expected to sacrifice everything, subscribe to this channel. You're not alone. This wasn't a new dynamic. This was a story 8 years in the making. In our family, there were always two paths. There was my path, and there was Leo's path. My path was paved with bus schedules, spreadsheets, and the smell of stale coffee. As soon as I graduated high school, I started working full-time. That wasn't a choice, it was an expectation. I enrolled in community college, dragging myself to night classes after a 9-hour shift. I paid for every single credit myself. For 8 years, my life was a relentless loop of work, school, study, sleep, repeat. I remember sitting in fluorescent-lit classrooms at 9 p.m., my eyes burning, trying to focus on a professor while my phone buzzed with texts from friends who were out, living their lives. I worked weekends. I clocked in for overtime shifts while my peers were going on vacations, getting engaged, moving forward. I became a master of the word no. No, I can't come out, I have to work. No, I can't afford a new coat, I'd say, while secretly sewing up the torn lining of my old one. No, I can't join the trip, I'd text, while scrolling through pictures of beaches I'd never see. Every dollar I didn't spend was a victory. Every dollar went into that savings account. That number, $42,000, wasn't just money. It was 8 years of brown-bagged lunches that all tasted like cardboard. It was 8 years of gripping the wheel of my beat-up car, praying to the engine block that it would just start one more time. I wasn't just saving for a house. I was building an escape. I was building a future that I owned, a future no one could touch. Then, there was Leo's path. While I was balancing my community college tuition, Leo was off at a 4-year university, living in a dorm. My parents paid for everything. His tuition, his books, his meal plan, his rent. He was given the perfect privileged start, handed to him on a silver platter. And he dropped out. But for Leo, there are no consequences. There was no real world waiting to smack him in the face. No frantic job hunt. No student loans to repay. No, for Leo, there was just a soft landing. He came home, and my parents treated it like a minor setback. After he got bored of college, he decided he was an entrepreneur. This began the series of failed startups. I put that in quotes because they were just expensive hobbies my parents funded. One month, he needed $5,000 for a revolutionary drop-shipping website. My parents gave it to him. 6 weeks later, the website was gone, and so was the money. The next time, he was going to be a day trader and just needed a small float of $10,000. That vanished too. Each time, my parents would sigh, shake their heads, and then write another check. He was the dreamer. He was the golden child. His failures were just unfortunate. His whims were investments. And what was I? I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the boring one who just worked. I see it so clearly now. In their eyes, I wasn't even a person. I was a utility. He was their high-risk, high-reward passion project, and I was their insurance policy. My brother, the man who had personally set tens of thousands of their dollars on fire, had just pulled the fire alarm. And I was the one they expected to put it out. For years I told myself that living at home was a smart financial decision. I was saving money. I was being frugal. It was the logical choice. But I was lying to myself. I was living in a cage someone else had convinced me was a sanctuary. The rent-free status, that was the name of the cage. It was the privilege they held over my head every single day. "You're so lucky," my mother would say into the phone, her voice just loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "Maya lives here rent-free. She's saving so much money. We just don't have the heart to charge her." It was a performance. It was designed to remind me that I was a guest, that I was living on their charity. It was a debt they were letting me rack up, a debt they fully intended to collect on. Every holiday, every birthday, when Leo would show up with empty pockets and a new, grand idea, the attention would inevitably shift to me. "Well, Maya can help out, right?" my dad would say, half joking. "She doesn't have any real expenses." It was a constant, low-level hum of expectation. This idea that my money wasn't really my money, it was family money that I was just holding. That rent-free status wasn't kindness, it was a trap. It wasn't a gift, it was leverage. It was their way of keeping me tethered, of keeping my savings within their reach. By letting me live in their house, under their rules, they felt they had a right to the money I was saving. It was an unspoken contract where I paid my rent in the form of future obligation. I see it so clearly now, it's sickening. They weren't helping me save for my future, they were just letting me hold their next bailout fund. My $42,000 was never Maya's house fund in their minds. No, it was the family emergency fund. And the only emergency that ever mattered in this house was Leo. It makes my stomach turn. All those years I was sacrificing, all those extra shifts I picked up, all those nights I came home exhausted, smelling like stale office coffee. I thought I was building my independence. I thought I was building a life. What a fool I was. I wasn't building anything. I was just acting as their high-interest savings account. My discipline was just collateral for my brother's addiction. My hard work was just a backstop for his next spectacular failure. Every single dollar I saved was just another drop in the bucket they planned to steal the moment he needed it. It makes you wonder, did they ever even want me to buy that house? Or was that just a convenient story they told themselves, and me, until the next crisis? How can you ever get ahead when the people who are supposed to be your safety net are secretly just waiting to cut the rope? How can you build a future when your own family sees your success as nothing more than a resource they get to spend? I wasn't their daughter, I was their investment, and they were ready to cash out. Let's go back to that ambush meeting, back to that stale, suffocating air in the living room. As I sat there, reeling from their demand, the full truth started to spill out, and it was so much worse than I could have imagined. My brother's $75,000 debt? That wasn't a new development. This wasn't a panicked phone call he'd made last night. This was a hole he had been digging for months. This was a fire that had been raging, hidden, right beneath my feet. And I wasn't their first stop. The reason they were coming to me, the reason they were demanding my entire future, wasn't just to save Leo. It was because they had already tried, and they had already failed. Before they ever sat me down, before they ever dreamed of asking me for a penny, they had already set their own lives on fire. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks before this family meeting, while I was at work planning my budget, while I was asleep in my bed in this very house, they had gone to the bank. They secretly remortgaged their house. They didn't just borrow against it, they remortgaged it to the limit. Every last cent of equity they had built over 30 years, gone, sucked dry. And they funneled all of it, every dollar, to Leo, to the gambling, to the failed startups, to the black hole that was my brother. I just stared at them. My father, the man who taught me to balance a checkbook. My mother, the woman who clipped coupons. They had secretly, recklessly, detonated their own financial security. And it still wasn't enough. The $75,000 was after the remortgage. That was just the outstanding balance. The loan sharks were still at the door. The debt was still growing. They had nothing left. The house was gone. Their retirement was gone. They were completely, totally, financially ruined. And they were desperate. I looked at my parents, and I didn't see the people who raised me. I saw two terrified strangers who had gambled their entire lives on the golden child and lost. I saw the desperation in their eyes, the shame, the panic. That's when they turned to me. Do you see? They didn't come to me as a choice. They came to me as a last resort. I wasn't plan B. I was the last asset left to liquidate. I was the final life raft on a ship they had already sunk. My $42,000 wasn't just help, it was their only option. They had exhausted their own future, and now they were here to consume mine. This whole time, I had been living in their house, thinking I was the one indebted to them for rent-free living. But the truth was, they were the ones indebted. They were drowning in my brother's choices. And their plan wasn't to ask me for a life vest. Their plan was to pull me under with them. That demand for my $42,000, it wasn't a request for help. It was the frantic, selfish clawing of two people about to go under, willing to sacrifice their other child to save themselves. The betrayal of it. It was absolute. It was a physical thing. It felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was just collateral. The last item in the pawn shop. And they were furious that I was refusing to be sold. The no I delivered in that living room wasn't just a word, it was a declaration of war. And the battle lines were drawn instantly. The atmosphere in that house changed overnight. It went from tense to toxic. The house itself became silent. The TV stayed off. The only sounds were the ones meant to punish me. A slammed cabinet door, the scrape of a chair on the kitchen tile, the sound of my parents whispering in their room, a whisper that would immediately stop the second I walked past their door. The air was so thick with resentment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every hallway, every room, was charged with this humming, silent rage. My brother, Leo, the 30-year-old man whose $75,000 debt had started this fire, completely vanished. He became a ghost in his own home. He perfected the art of non-existence. I'd be in the kitchen, and he'd walk in, see me, and physically turn 180 degrees and walk back out without a sound. He wouldn't just avoid eye contact, he would look at the wall above my head. His shoulders would bunch up around his ears, this physical shield of, "You don't exist to me." He just let our parents fight his war for him. It was the ultimate cowardice. He was the one who gambled. He was the one facing loan sharks. But he put our parents in the line of fire, and now they were pointing all their weapons at me, and he just sat back, silent, letting it happen. That silence was louder than any accusation. It was the silence of entitlement. The silence of a man who truly believed he was owed my future. My mother. She took a different approach. She weaponized her grief. Suddenly, she was constantly crying. This wasn't quiet, private sadness. This was a performance. I'd find her in the living room, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, staring out the window, letting out a perfectly audible, shaky sigh. I'd walk into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and she'd be at the sink, her shoulders shaking, letting out these loud, theatrical sobs. Sometimes it was a low wail from her bedroom, just loud enough to travel down the hall. Sometimes it was a sharp, martyred sniffle every time I entered a room. It was all designed for me to see. It was a constant, passive-aggressive assault. A non-stop reminder, look what you're doing to me. Look how you're tearing this family apart. Look how you're hurting your mother. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to feel so guilty, so monstrous, that I would just give in to make the crying stop. My father, he tried to be the reasonable one. He cornered me while I was trying to do the dishes. He put his hand on my arm, that classic disappointed dad look on his face. "It's just money, Maya," he said, his voice low and serious. "Family is more important." I just stared at him. Just money? My internal voice was screaming. Was it just money when I was working 60-hour weeks? Was it just money when I was skipping meals to save a few dollars? Was it just money when he secretly remortgaged this very house, setting his own future on fire for Leo? The hypocrisy was suffocating. "It's my money," I told him, pulling my arm away. "It's my future. I saved this for my life. I set the boundary. I held my ground. I looked him right in the eye. I saved this for my future. Leo ruined his. His face hardened. The reasonable dad mask slipped. The disappointment vanished, and I saw the same anger I'd seen in my mother's eyes. I wasn't just refusing to help. I was defying the family hierarchy. I was rejecting my role as the scapegoat, and they could not stand it. Setting that boundary didn't fix anything. It just made everything so much worse. It was like flipping a switch. The disappointed dad and the crying mom personas, they vanished. The passive aggression was gone, and in its place was pure, unfiltered rage. That's when the golden child programming kicked into high gear. That's when they started really attacking me. It was a constant barrage. Every time I left my room, one of them was there, waiting. You are so selfish. Gone to. It's the grabber were. My mother spat the word at me while I was trying to make toast. It felt like a slap. Me? Selfish? I'd been working since I was a teenager. I'd paid for my own education. I was selfish? We did everything for you, my dad chimed in, his voice rising, his face turning red. We let you live here, rent-free, so you could save. And for what? So you could hoard it like a dragon while your family falls apart? They called me ungrateful. That was the word they loved the most. Ungrateful. They threw it at me like a stone, over and over. After everything we've given you, you wouldn't have that money if it wasn't for us. You're just going to let this family be destroyed? I tried to argue. I tried to defend myself. It's my money. I earned it. Leo is a grown man. He did this. But it didn't matter. They weren't listening. Logic had left the building. They weren't trying to have a discussion. They were trying to break my will. They were trying to bully me into submission. The absurdity of it was suffocating. The responsible one, the one who saved, was being called ungrateful by the very people who had funded the irresponsible one's failures. The ones who had just remortgaged their own house for him were calling me selfish for not liquidating my future. My hard work wasn't a virtue to them. It was a betrayal. Then came the moment that changed everything. My dad cornered me in the hallway, blocking my path to my bedroom. He was shaking. He looked older, desperate. His voice dropped, and it was filled with a venom I had never heard before. You are letting your brother die. He said it. He actually said it. He looked me, his daughter, right in the eye, and told me that I was the one killing my brother, not the gambling, not the loan sharks, not Leo's own choices. Me. My refusal to hand over my life savings was a death sentence. Heat climbed my spine, my jaw locked until it ached. In that second, something inside me went cold. The part of me that was their daughter, the part that still craved their approval, it just died. They really believed it. That was the most terrifying part. They genuinely, 100% believed that Leo was the victim, and I was the villain. This internal monologue just looped in my head. They did this. They remortgaged their home for him. They lit their own retirement on fire, their own security, their entire future. And now they are standing here, holding a gasoline can, demanding I light my $42,000 on fire too. They were furious that I refused to burn with them. I looked at my father's face, contorted with rage, and my mother, standing right behind him. Her eyes narrowed. These were not the people who raised me. I didn't recognize them. Desperation had turned them into monsters. Their love for their golden child had completely eclipsed any love they ever had for me. And in that cold, quiet moment in the hallway, the final, horrifying realization landed. I am not safe here. It wasn't just my emotions. It was my money. They had already proved they would do anything to save him, including financial ruin. They were desperate. They were calling me a killer. How long before they stopped yelling and just took it? How long before they found my bank statements? How long before they tried to access my account? I wasn't living with enablers anymore. I was living with potential thieves. I had to get out. And I had to get my money out, first. I locked myself in my bedroom, my back against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could still hear my father's voice in the hall. You are letting your brother die. My hands were shaking. I needed an anchor. I needed someone sane. I scrolled through my contacts and called my Aunt Clara, my dad's sister. She was the only one in the family who had ever seen through the golden child facade. I told her everything. The $75,000 debt, the loan sharks, the secret remortgage, the demand for my $42,000, the crying, the screaming, the word ungrateful. She didn't even sound surprised. She let out a long, tired sigh. "Honey," she said, "they have always bailed him out. Since he was a teenager. They've always thrown good money after bad. I never thought they'd be stupid enough to remortgage the house." I was crying now, quiet, hot tears. "They called me selfish, Aunt Clara. They said I was killing him." Her voice turned to steel. "You listen to me," she said, cutting through my panic. "Do not give them 1 cent. Don't set yourself on fire to keep them warm." That was it. That was the permission I needed. The fog of guilt, the years of programming, it all just evaporated. She was right. I wasn't saving them. I was just enabling them. I was feeding the monster that was devouring my family. And I was next on the menu. The moment I hung up, the panic was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was day 3 since the ambush. I was done. The very first thing I did was get on my laptop. I found a local lawyer, paid for a 30-minute consultation, and explained my situation. I needed to know my risks. Could they try to claim my savings? Could they take out credit in my name? He gave me a clear, terrifying list of what desperate people could do. The next morning, I got up before anyone else in the house. I walked out the front door, and I didn't go to work. I went to a completely different bank. A new bank, one my family had no connection to, in the next town over. I sat in front of a bank teller, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The air conditioning was freezing, and I couldn't stop my knee from bouncing. I opened a new checking and a new savings account, in my name only. Then, the final step. I logged into my old bank's app on my phone. My fingers shook on the keypad. I typed in the amount. $42,000. I stared at the number, my entire future, 8 years of my life. My thumb hovered over the confirm transfer button. This was it. This was the point of no return. I wasn't just moving money. I was building a wall. I was choosing myself. I pressed the button. A small green checkmark appeared. Transfer complete. It was done. It was irreversible. That night, I was back in my bedroom. I waited until I heard my parents go to sleep. I pulled a duffel bag from my closet and quietly, carefully, I began to pack. Not clothes. Documents. My passport, my birth certificate, my social security card, every bank statement, every piece of paper that proved I was me. I hid them all in the bottom of the bag. Then I went online and found a room to rent. I paid the deposit. I was leaving that weekend. It was day 4. I was at work when my phone exploded. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID. They must have tried to access the old account. They must have seen the 0 balance. I stepped outside and answered. It wasn't even words. It was just screaming. A wall of sound, my mother and father both on the line, their voices cracking with a rage I had never, ever heard. And then, through the static, I heard the word that stopped my heart, the word that finally severed the last thread. Thief. My mother, screaming it. "You're a thief! You stole that money! You stole it from your family!" They were calling me a thief. For moving my own money, my own savings. They had finally shown me who I was to them. I wasn't a daughter. I was just an ATM. And I had just gone out of service. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. That one word thief had turned my blood to ice. I just stood there on the sidewalk, the city noise fading into a dull roar. I held the phone to my ear, listening to them rage, listening to them call me every name in the book. When they finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was calm. It was flat. It was a voice they had never heard before. "I am officially moving out this weekend." Then, I hung up. My thumb moved across the screen. I found my mother's contact. Block. I found my father's contact. Block. I found Leo. Block. I blocked every flying monkey, every enabling relative who might try to call on their behalf. It was over. The war was over because I had simply left the battlefield. That weekend, I moved. I took my 2 duffel bags of clothes and my box of essential documents, and I moved into the new room I had rented. It was small. It was just 4 walls and a worn-out carpet. My furniture was just a mattress on the floor and a stack of boxes I was using as a nightstand. It was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. It was safe. That first night, I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, eating instant noodles out of a plastic bowl. There was no screaming. There was no crying in the next room. There was no one waiting to ambush me in the hallway. It was just quiet. I took my laptop out and, following my lawyer's advice, I ran a full credit check on myself. I was terrified they had already tried something, tried to open a card in my name, tried to link me to that gambling debt. The report loaded. Clean. Nothing. No new accounts, no strange inquiries. I had gotten out just in time. I opened my new banking app. The number was sitting right there, $42,000. It was all mine. It was secure. I sat there in the quiet, on the floor of my empty new room, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I could actually breathe. I felt the tension that had been living in my shoulders for 8 years just release. I was finally, completely, on my own, and it was a paradise. My Aunt Clara was my only family contact now. She's the one who checked in. She's the one who brought me a housewarming gift, a hot plate, and a bag of groceries. She proved that family isn't about obligation or blood. It's about respect. It's about the people who see you as a person, not a resource. I never found out what happened with their house. I don't know what happened with the loan sharks. I don't know if Leo ever faced a single consequence. And the truth is, I don't care. That is their consequence to live with. That is the fire they set. My only job was to stop being their kindling. My energy was focused on my goal. I kept working. I kept saving. A year later, that $42,000, plus all the new money I had saved by not living in that toxic house, went exactly where it was always supposed to go. It went to a down payment. On my own condo. When I signed the papers, my hand wasn't shaking. When I got the keys, I didn't cry. I just felt a sense of peace. They called me selfish. They called me a thief. But the real theft was the one they tried to commit every single day. The theft of my work, my dreams, and my future, all to feed their obsession with their golden child. Setting a boundary doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you ungrateful or selfish. It's what keeps you alive. It's the wall you build to protect your own life. And sometimes, it's the only thing that can finally set you free. If you've ever been the responsible one, the scapegoat who finally had enough, subscribe to the channel. You're not alone.